I brought a $180,000 check to my daughter's college graduation dinner, the one I'd been saving since her first day of kindergarten. When I asked my son-in-law where I should sit, he looked at my flannel shirt and said, "This is a linen-only table, Frank. We don't want you sweating on the good china." Then he pointed me toward a folding chair by the kitchen door. My daughter heard every word and kept scrolling on her phone. I sat in that folding chair for 4 hours. Then I stood up, set my napkin down, and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. They had no idea what that napkin was about to cost them. Welcome back, and thank you for spending part of your evening with me. If this is your first time here, I'm Frank Delacroix, and I tell stories the way I used to build houses, one true board at a time. Tell me in the comments what state you're watching from tonight. I read every single one before I go to sleep. A quick note before we start. Some details in tonight's story have been adjusted for privacy, but the heart of it is as real as anything I've ever built. People say a man's hands tell you everything about his life. Mine tell you I spent 43 years as a union electrician in Cleveland, Ohio, running conduit through buildings that are still standing long after the companies that owned them went under. My knuckles are swollen in 3 places. There's a scar across my left palm from 1,987 that still aches when it rains. I don't mind any of it. Every mark is a receipt for a day I showed up. But I need to start with Rosalind, because nothing about this story makes sense without her. Rosalind was my wife for 39 years. She passed 4 years ago this coming March, and I still set 2 coffee cups out most mornings before I catch myself. The kitchen light does something at 6 a.m. That reminds me of the way she used to stand at the stove, and I've stopped fighting the feeling that she's still keeping an eye on me. Grief doesn't leave. It just learns to sit quietly in the corner of the room. It was a Thursday morning in late May, and I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror in the house Rosalind and I bought in 1986, trying to decide what a 68-year-old man wears to his only daughter's graduate school commencement dinner. Not the ceremony itself that was earlier in the day, a big auditorium event I'd watched from the 14th row, clapping until my palms stung when they called her name. Dr. Sophia Delacroix Reyes. Doctor. My little girl, who used to ride on my shoulders at the Cleveland Air Show, had just finished her doctorate in clinical psychology. I pulled out the gray button-down Rosalind bought me for our 35th anniversary. Still fit fine. I pressed it myself the night before because somebody has to keep a tradition alive even after the person who started it is gone. "How do I look, Roz?" I asked the empty bedroom. I do that more than I probably should. 4 years now, and I still narrate my mornings to a woman who isn't there to hear them, because somehow it still feels like she is. I sat on the edge of the bed and picked up her photograph off the nightstand, taken at a company picnic back in '95. She's laughing at something just out of frame, sunglasses pushed up into her hair. That was Roz. Always halfway to a joke before anyone else caught up. "Big day," I told her. "Sophia's a doctor now. Can you believe that?" I set the photo back exactly where it belonged, straightened it the way I straighten every photo in this house, and opened the drawer of my nightstand. The envelope had been sitting there for 2 months. Thick. Manila, not white. I've never liked the funeral home feel of a white envelope. Sealed with packing tape because I don't trust a flap that just licks shut. $180,000. Counted twice. Same as I count everything twice. Growing up, the youngest of 6 kids in a 2-bedroom house in Parma taught me that counting once is how things go missing. The plan was simple. Sophia and her husband, Marcus, had been renting a cramped 2-bedroom for 3 years while she finished her doctorate, and he worked his way up at a marketing firm downtown. They'd been talking, in the careful way young couples talk when they don't want to sound like they're asking, about a house, a real one, with a yard, maybe someday a nursery. I'd been quietly building toward this number since the week Sophia was born, back when I was pulling double shifts and Rosalind was clipping coupons at the kitchen table with our daughter asleep on her shoulder. I tucked the envelope into the inside pocket of my sport coat, buttoned it, and pressed my hand flat against my chest until I could feel the weight of it there. "All right, Rose," I said, picking my keys up off the dresser. "Let's go watch our girl." The drive to the restaurant Marcus had picked some place downtown called Embers, the kind with a reservation line and a dress code posted discreetly by the hostess stand. Took about 25 minutes from my place in the old neighborhood. I'd looked the restaurant up the night before out of habit. Prefix menu, no prices listed next to the entrees, which in my experience means the prices are bad news. I want to be honest about something before I go further into this story. because I think it matters for understanding everything that happened after. I never once, in 68 years, thought of myself as a man who kept score in his own family. I gave because I loved, not because I was building toward a receipt. But I want you to hold on to that idea anyway, the receipt, because it becomes important later, and not in the way you'd expect. I arrived at the private dining room 15 minutes early. Same as I've arrived everywhere. 15 minutes early since 1974. The room already had that particular hush of expensive places. Low lighting, white tablecloths, servers moving like they were trained not to make eye contact until spoken to. There was a long table set for what looked like 24 people. Sophia's colleagues from the program, professors, Marcus's parents and his two brothers, a handful of friends I recognized from the wedding 3 years back. Marcus met me at the door of the private room. Tall kid, 31 years old, the kind of handshake grip that's been practiced in a mirror. He looked me over flannel shirt, my good jeans, the boots I'd polished the night before, and something crossed his face that he tried to smooth over too quickly for it to have been anything other than what it was. "Frank," he said. "Hey. Big night, huh?" "Biggest," I said. "Where do you want me?" "Huh." He glanced past me toward the table, toward a cluster of place cards near the head, where I could already see his parents' names in careful calligraphy, Robert and Deborah Halloway. I'd met Robert and Deborah exactly 6 times in 3 years. They ran a boutique real estate firm out in the suburbs and had a way of asking what I did for a living that made it clear they already had an answer prepared, and it wasn't a compliment. "So here's the thing," Marcus said, lowering his voice like we were sharing something delicate. "The room's already tight on seating, and honestly, with the dress code and everything," he gestured vaguely at my shirt, "we didn't want anyone from Sophia's program to get the wrong idea about, the family. There's a chair for you right by the service door. Little more casual back there. You'll still be able to hear everything." I looked past him at the table. 24 place settings, crystal glasses, a menu card at each seat with a calligraphy font I couldn't have named but recognized as expensive. And near the kitchen door, tucked half behind a server station, a plain wooden folding chair with no place setting at all. "Sophia know about this arrangement?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "She's stressed about tonight, Frank. Let's not make it a thing." I could have made it a thing right there. I want you to know that. I had 43 years of not backing down from a foreman who tried to shortcut a wiring inspection. And I could have found the words to make that room understand exactly who built the floor they were standing on, in every sense that mattered. But I looked past Marcus and saw Sophia across the room in a blue dress Rosalind would have loved, laughing at something one of her professors said, glowing the particular way a person glows when 8 years of work has finally paid off. And I decided that whatever this dinner turned into, it wasn't going to start with me making a scene at my daughter's graduation. "Folding chair's fine," I said. I sat down in that folding chair with my back against the swinging kitchen door, close enough to catch a server's elbow every few minutes, and I watched my daughter's graduation dinner happen 4 feet away from a table I hadn't been invited to sit at. Nobody brought me a menu. I asked a passing server for one, and she looked flustered, like she wasn't sure whether I counted as a guest, before finding me a paper menu clearly meant for staff review. No prices, no formatting. I ordered the same thing Sophia had. I'd overheard her, and ate it alone off a service tray balanced on my knees, because there was no room at the folding chair station for an actual place setting. 20 minutes in, Robert Halloway stood and raised his glass. He talked for nearly 5 minutes about Sophia's remarkable journey, about how proud the Halloway family was to watch her join the ranks of doctors in her field, about the sacrifices this family had made to support her education. He mentioned Marcus's support at length. He mentioned Deborah's emotional encouragement during finals season. He did not mention me. Not once. Not the man who'd paid Sophia's undergraduate tuition in full, who'd driven 2 hours each way every single weekend during her master's program to help her move apartments, fix her car, sit with her through 3 all-nighters when her first thesis committee fell apart. I sat in my folding chair and clapped along with everyone else when he finished, because that's what you do, and I told myself it didn't matter, because none of it was about me. It was about Sophia. I kept telling myself that for the rest of the dinner, the way you keep telling yourself a splinter doesn't hurt once it's already halfway under the skin. Around the 90-minute mark, one of Sophia's professors, an older woman with kind eyes and a British accent, wandered over near the service station on her way to the restroom and paused, looking at me with the particular curiosity of someone piecing something together. "You've been sitting back here the whole dinner," she said. "Are you at the restaurant?" "I'm the father," I said, low I'm low, low. Something shifted in her face, not embarrassment exactly, more like a woman recalibrating a math problem that had just stopped adding up. Oh, she said. Oh, I see. She glanced toward the head of the table, toward Robert Halloway still holding court, and back at me. And I watched her decide, visibly, not to say whatever she'd been about to say. She excused herself and didn't come back to that side of the room again. By the time the dessert plates came around, my knees had gone stiff from the folding chair, and my back had settled into the particular ache that comes from 4 hours on hard wood with nothing to lean against. I watched Sophia across the room, radiant, exhausted, happy. Being handed a card from Deborah Halloway with what I could see even from a distance was a substantial check tucked inside. Sophia hugged her mother-in-law for a long moment. She hadn't looked toward the service station once all night. I want to tell you the exact moment something in my chest went quiet and cold, because I've thought about it a lot since. It wasn't the folding chair. It wasn't even the toast. It was watching my daughter's face light up over a card from a woman who'd contributed nothing to the 8 years of tuition, moving trucks, and 2 a.m. phone calls that got her to that stage, while the man sitting 8 feet away with $180,000 folded against his heart remained invisible to her entirely. I stood up. My napkin, a real cloth one, at least the restaurant had given me that much. I folded once, then again, and set it down on the seat of the folding chair, neat as a finished piece of trim work. I walked past the head of the table on my way out. Marcus caught my eye and gave me an awkward half-wave, like a man saying goodbye to a coworker he doesn't know well. Sophia was mid-laugh at something and didn't see me leave at all. I drove home with the windows cracked despite the cold, letting the night air do what it could, and I didn't cry until I was parked in my own driveway with the engine off, both hands still on the wheel. Then I let myself have exactly 10 minutes of it before I went inside, hung up my sport coat, and put the envelope back in the nightstand drawer. The next morning, I did what I do when my chest won't settle. I called Priya Anand. Priya had been my attorney for going on 18 years, ever since a contractor tried to stiff me on a job in '08, and I needed somebody sharper than me to get my money back. She'd handled Rosalind's estate. She'd set up my retirement trust. She's the kind of lawyer who tells you the truth even when you'd rather she didn't. "Frank," she said when she picked up, "you sound tired." "Rough night," I said, and told her everything. The folding chair. The toast that skipped me entirely. The check from the Halloways that Sophia hugged her mother-in-law for. Priya was quiet for a moment. "Do you still want to give them the down payment money?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "That's actually not why I'm calling. I want you to look at something for me. 6 months ago, Marcus asked me to co-sign on a business line of credit for some marketing venture he was starting on the side. I want you to pull the paperwork and tell me exactly what I signed." There was a pause on the line that told me Priya already didn't like where this was going. "Send it over," she said. "Give me until Monday. I want to pause the story here and ask you something, the way I always do about halfway through. If you've ever given everything you had to people who couldn't be bothered to save you a seat, type the word chair in the comments right now. Just that. It helps me know you're still with me, and honestly, after the week I'm about to tell you about, I could use the company. And I need to say one more thing before we keep going. What comes next gets more complicated, not less. If tonight isn't the night for a story like that, there's no judgment in stepping away. But if you're staying, settle in, because Marcus and the Halloways had no idea what 2 months of paperwork was about to cost them. Monday morning, Priya called before 9. "I need you to come in," she said. "Bring coffee. You're going to want to be sitting down for this." Her office was on the 9th floor of a building on Euclid Avenue that had been there since before I was born, the kind of place with real wood paneling and carpet thick enough to swallow footsteps. She had 2 mugs of coffee waiting, which I'd learned over 18 years was her way of giving you something to hold before she handed you something heavier. "Let's start with what you think you know," she said, opening a folder already thick with paper. "You co-signed a business line of credit for Marcus 6 months ago. $50,000 for a digital marketing agency he was starting as a side venture." "That's what he told me," I said. "That's true as far as it goes." She slid a document across the desk. "But when a lender extends credit against a co-signer's assets, they run a full financial profile on that co-signer. Your retirement accounts, your home equity, everything. Marcus's loan application listed your assets as collateral security, which you agreed to when you signed, whether you fully understood the mechanism or not. That part's not the problem. The problem is what happened after the loan was approved." She pulled a second document from the folder. A ledger, printed from some kind of business accounting software. The $50,000 was dispersed in April. According to these records, 22,000 of it went to legitimate business expenses, website development, some ad spend, a co-working space membership. The remaining 28,000 was transferred, in 3 separate installments, into a personal checking account. Marcus and Sophia's joint account. I wrapped both hands around my coffee mug. For what? A down payment, Priya said quietly, on a lake house in Chagrin Falls, which they closed on 11 weeks ago. The room went very still. I thought about every conversation I'd had with Sophia in the last 3 months. She'd never once mentioned a lake house. She'd talked about the graduate program, about job interviews, about how tight money was while she finished her dissertation. Never once about a second property. They used business credit collateralized against my retirement savings, I said slowly, to buy a vacation home they didn't tell me about. That appears to be exactly what happened, Priya said. And Frank, there's something else. I want you to look at the loan documents themselves before I say anything more. She slid a third folder across, a signature page, the kind attached to formal loan paperwork. My signature at the bottom, in my handwriting, the particular way I loop the F in Frank and let the D in Delacroix trail off at a slight downward angle, same as I've signed my name for 50 years. The problem was the date, March 3rd. I checked my calendar on my phone right there in her office. On March 3rd, I had been in Florida for 11 days visiting my sister, a trip Sophia herself had helped me book because she wanted me out of the house for my birthday. I have the boarding passes in an email. I have photographs Sophia took of me at a beach 2,000 miles from Cleveland. I wasn't in Ohio, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. I wasn't anywhere near this office on that date. Priya's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did, the particular stillness of a woman who has been afraid of a conclusion and just watched it confirmed. 6 weeks before that trip, she said carefully. Do you remember signing anything for Marcus? Anything he said was routine paperwork, maybe scanned and emailed? I thought back. There had been something Marcus had asked me to sign, what he called an updated co-signer authorization form for the original credit line. Said it was just a formality the bank required for the annual review. I'd signed it at my kitchen table, photographed it with my phone the way he'd asked, and sent it back without keeping a copy for myself. He saved the signature, I said slowly, understanding arriving the way cold water does, all at once. He cut my signature out of that photo and used it on a new document. That's my working theory, Priya said. And Frank, I need you to understand what I'm telling you. Forging a signature on financial paperwork, particularly for the purpose of securing additional credit, is not a gray area. In Ohio, that's forgery in the second degree at minimum, and depending on how the funds were represented to the lender, it could rise to a fraud charge. I pushed back from her desk, needing distance from what I was hearing. My son-in-law, the man who'd married my daughter in a ceremony I paid for, who'd shaken my hand at that wedding and told me he'd take care of her. He'd cut my name out of a photograph and used it to steal against my own retirement so he could buy a lake house and never mention it to me, all while sitting me in a folding chair by the kitchen door so I wouldn't embarrass anyone in front of his parents. Does Sophia know? I asked. My voice cracked on her name in a way it hadn't cracked in years. I don't know, Priya said honestly. I can't tell you what your daughter knows. What I can tell you is that her name is on the joint account that received the money. I sat with that for a long moment. My little girl. The one who used to fall asleep against my chest during Indians games. The one whose bicycle I taught her to ride in the church parking lot on Sunday mornings. I didn't want to believe she'd known. I also understood, somewhere underneath the wanting, that I didn't actually know either way, and that not knowing was its own particular kind of pain. What do I do? I asked. Tonight, nothing, Priya said. Go home. I'm going to send a formal notice to Marcus requesting a full accounting of the loan disbursement and putting him on written notice that unauthorized use of your signature has been identified. That starts a legal clock whether he responds or not. She paused. And, Frank, I think you should go home and open the drawer where you keep Rosalind's things. There's something in there I think you need to see, if you haven't already. I frowned at her. What are you talking about? When we processed Rosalind's estate 4 years ago, Priya said, she left a sealed letter with my office, to be given to you only if certain conditions were ever met. One of those conditions was, and I'm quoting her instructions here, if Frank ever finds himself alone at his own family's table. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. I think I do now. My hands had gone very still on the arm of the chair. You've had a letter from my wife. For 4 years. I have, Priya said gently. I wasn't permitted to give it to you until the condition was met. I believe it was met on Thursday night. I drove home in a fog I don't fully remember navigating. Priya had the letter couriered to my house that same afternoon, a plain envelope with Rosalind's handwriting on the front, my name, in the looping cursive she'd used on every birthday card and lunch note for 39 years. I sat down at my kitchen table with that envelope in front of me for a long time before I could bring myself to open it. Inside was a single sheet of her stationery, the pale blue paper with the small floral border she'd used since the 90s. Her handwriting started neat at the top and loosened toward the bottom, the way it always did when she had more to say than time to say it. Frank, if you're reading this, it means the thing I was afraid of happened, and I'm sorry I'm not there to hold your hand through it. I want you to know I saw it coming, even before I got sick. You've always loved with your whole chest, and you've always assumed everyone else does too. And I've watched Sophia's marriage since the wedding with a feeling I never wanted to name out loud because I didn't want to poison your relationship with her before it needed poisoning. I don't think Sophia is a bad person, Frank. I think she married a man who is very good at making people feel like an inconvenience for wanting to be included. And I think she spent 3 years slowly learning not to notice that happening to you, because noticing it would cost her something she's not ready to give up. That is not the same as her being cruel, but it will feel the same to you, and I need you to be able to tell the difference, because one of those things you can forgive, and the other you protect yourself from. You gave that girl everything you had, Frank, and I loved you for it every single day we were married. But please, if you're reading this letter, do not give away what's left of yourself trying to buy a seat at a table that was never set for you to begin with. Set your own table. You built houses your whole life. You know how to do this. I love you today and every day after this one wherever I am, Rose. I don't know how long I sat at that table after I finished reading. Long enough for the kitchen to go dark around me without my noticing. My wife had known. She'd watched something I hadn't let myself see, and she'd left me a map to it from 4 years in the future, sealed until the exact night I needed it most. You knew, I said out loud to the empty kitchen. You knew, and you left the door open for me anyway. I folded the letter back into its envelope and set it beside Priya's folder on the table. 2 different kinds of truth, arriving on the same day, saying the same thing in 2 different languages. They came to my house 6 days later, on a Sunday afternoon. Priya's notice had gone out on Wednesday, and people like Marcus don't answer a lawyer's letter with a phone call. They answer in person, because in person, they still have their faces to work with. I was in my garage workshop, small, nothing like a real shop, just a bench and some tools I'd kept sharp since retirement when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I set down the chisel I'd been using on a birdhouse I was building for no particular reason, wiped my hands, and walked around front. Sophia and Marcus were already on the porch. Sophia looked like she hadn't slept. Marcus wore the expression of a man who'd rehearsed something in the car. Dad, Sophia said, and her voice cracked on the word in a way that told me, more than anything Priya had found in a folder, that whatever she knew or didn't know before this week, she understood now. Come in, I said. I'll put coffee on. I did not hug either of them. I noticed Sophia's face fall slightly when I didn't, and some small, tired part of me was glad she'd noticed. We sat in my living room, them on the couch, me in Rosalind's old armchair across the coffee table, the way I'd arranged it before they arrived, same as I'd have thought through the angle of a cut. Dad, we need to talk about the letter from your attorney. Marcus started, hands clasped, voice low and rehearsed. I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding about the loan paperwork. What specifically is the misunderstanding? I asked. My voice stayed level, not because I wasn't furious, because anger spent on a man who isn't listening is just noise, and I'd learned that lesson 40 years before Marcus was born. He faltered. That wasn't the response he'd rehearsed for. The signature. I might have used an old scan of your signature for a routine renewal, but I wasn't trying to. You forged my name to collateralize a loan against my retirement savings, I said, and used part of the money to buy a lake house you never told me existed. Lake. Sophia's head turned sharply toward Marcus. You told me your parents helped with the lake house, she said, and her voice had gone thin and strange. You told me it was a gift from your father. The room went very quiet. I watched my daughter's face do something I recognized, because I'd felt it myself 6 nights earlier in a folding chair by a kitchen door. The particular vertigo of realizing the ground you'd been standing on was never actually solid. Sophia, Marcus started. Don't, I said, and something in my voice made him stop. I turned to my daughter. Did you know about my signature? No, she said, and there was no calculation in it, only a kind of horror I believed completely. Dad, I swear to you, I didn't know. I looked at her for a long moment, and I felt something in my chest loosen that had been clenched since the folding chair. Whatever else this week had cost me, it hadn't cost me my daughter. Not yet. Maybe not at all. Then you and I are going to keep talking, I said. But he and I are done unless a lawyer is in the room. I turned to Marcus. Everything from here goes through Priya Anand. You'll be hearing from her about the repayment schedule for the 28,000. And separately, I'm still deciding whether to pursue this as a criminal matter or resolve it civilly. That decision is going to depend a great deal on how honest you're willing to be in the next 30 minutes. Marcus's face went through several things at once: fear, calculation, something that might have been shame if I gave him the benefit of the doubt, which at that point in the conversation I was not inclined to do. Frank, if you press charges, if this becomes public, it could end my career. I have a reputation. You should have thought about that before you cut my signature out of a photograph, I said. He stood up, some old instinct toward bluster taking over. This is insane. Over a business loan? You're going to destroy this family over paperwork? I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly. I sat in a folding chair by a kitchen door at my daughter's graduation dinner while your father gave a toast that didn't mention my name, and I still came home and told myself it didn't matter. You destroyed something, Marcus. I'm just the first person willing to say so out loud. Sophia was crying now, quietly, her hands pressed against her mouth. Marcus looked at her, then at me, and something in his posture finally deflated. I'll get you the money back, he said, quieter now. All of it. I need time. You'll work that out with Priya, I said. I think you two should go home now. Sophia stood, and before she followed Marcus to the door, she crossed the room and hugged me, hard, the way she used to hug me as a little girl when a thunderstorm scared her awake. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. I didn't know. I should have noticed. I should have noticed the chair. I know, baby girl, I said, and held on to her a beat longer than either of us probably needed. We'll figure the rest out. Just not tonight. I walked them to the door. Marcus wouldn't look at me on his way out. Sophia paused on the threshold and turned back. Dad, she said, was there really a lake house? There really was, I said. There still is, actually. Priya tells me it's about to become part of a very interesting conversation about asset division, depending on some choices you two need to make in the next few weeks. She nodded, wiped her face, and walked to the car. I closed the door and stood in my hallway for a long moment, one hand flat against my chest where the envelope used to sit. The next several weeks moved the way these things move once the paperwork takes over slower than you'd think, given how fast the feelings arrive. Priya negotiated a repayment agreement with Marcus's attorney, the $28,000, plus interest, to be repaid over 18 months, secured against his portion of the lake house equity. The forgery matter itself, at my request, was resolved through a formal civil settlement rather than criminal charges. I thought about it for a long time, turned it over the way I turn over a plank before I cut it, and decided that putting my son-in-law in a courtroom wouldn't give me back a single evening I'd already lost, and it would take something from Sophia that she hadn't earned losing. Marcus's marketing venture folded within 4 months anyway. Once word got around his small industry circle about the loan irregularities, Priya's letters had surfaced during discovery. I didn't take pleasure in that the way I thought I might. Mostly I just felt tired. The particular exhaustion of a man watching a bridge finish collapsing that he'd already stopped standing on. Sophia moved out of the house she shared with Marcus in August. She didn't ask me for money to do it, which I noticed, and which mattered to me more than she probably realized. She rented a small apartment 11 minutes from my house, close enough that she started coming by on Sunday afternoons the way she used to as a kid, sitting at my kitchen table doing paperwork from her new postdoctoral position while I puttered in the garage. One Sunday in late September, she came in holding something behind her back, the way she used to hide report cards she was nervous about showing me. I found this, she said, going through some of my stuff from the apartment. She held out a small wooden object, a place card holder, the kind you'd see at a formal dinner, with a metal stand and a blank slot where a name card would go. It's from graduation night. I grabbed a stack of them as favors and never used them. I kept thinking about that folding chair, Dad. I think about it almost every day. I took it from her and turned it over in my hands. I want you to have a seat at every table I ever set from now on, she said, her voice unsteady. A real one. I don't care what anyone else thinks looks right. I didn't say anything for a moment, because my throat had gone tight in the particular way it does when you weren't expecting to be handed something that heavy. I built a table, I said finally. Did I ever tell you that? Right after your mother passed, I built a big oak table for the dining room, thinking I'd fill it with people eventually. It's been sitting there mostly empty for 4 years. I'd like to help you fill it, Sophia said. If that's still something you want. It's always been something I wanted, I said. I was just waiting for the right people to show up for it. That Thanksgiving, for the first time in 4 years, I set that oak table for more than 2. Sophia came, of course, along with her closest friend from the doctoral program and, cautiously, tentatively, Marcus, not as my son-in-law any longer, since the divorce papers had been filed by October, but as Ethan's father. Ethan is my grandson, 4 years old, the one bright, unbroken thing to come out of that entire marriage, and I've decided that whatever happened between the adults in this story, that boy gets a grandfather who shows up for every birthday, every holiday, every ordinary Tuesday he wants company. I set a place card holder at the head of that table, the same one Sophia had handed me in September, with a small folded card that simply read, Frank, not because I needed to be reminded of my own name, because I wanted my grandson to grow up watching what it looks like when a family finally gets it right, a seat at the table for every single person who shows up with something honest to offer, and an empty chair left open, always, for whoever earns their way back to it. I think about that folding chair sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and I've got nobody to talk to but Rosalind's photograph on the nightstand. I think about how close I came to sitting in silence forever, telling myself it didn't matter, telling myself that love means never asking for a seat. Here's what I've learned, and it's the only thing I really want you to carry out of this story with you tonight. You do not have to earn your place in the room by disappearing quietly into a corner of it. The people who are capable of truly seeing you will never once make you sit by the kitchen door. And if you find yourself there anyway, folding your napkin and standing up is not bitterness. It's the beginning of building a table of your own. I'm not a man who talks about faith much, but I believe some doors close so that our hands are free to build better ones. Family isn't a debt you pay off with silence. It's a table. Somebody has to set it, and it might as well be you. If tonight's story found you somewhere close to your own folding chair, tell me about it in the comments. Tell me what state you're writing from, and tell me who you'd invite to sit at the table you're building. Share this with somebody who needs to hear it tonight. And if you haven't yet, stay close, because there's another story waiting, and I'd be glad for the company. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. It means more than you probably know.